Tropical storm Julia hits northeastern Colombia. For this issue a hurricane warning. Central America prepares for the Julia's arrival. Brazil's presidential campaign continues. Candidate Lula da Silva held a mass rallying campaign in the state of Sao Paulo. Russia resumes transit on the Crimean Bridge with some restrictions after Saturday's attack that left 3 civilians dead and damage to infrastructure. Hello, welcome to From the South. I'm Luis Alberto Matos from the teleSUR studios in Havana, Cuba. We begin with the news. Colombian authorities issue a hurricane warning as Tropical Storm Julia is menacing San Andres and Providencia Islands with huge waves as it gains strength on Saturday. According to the nation's weather monitoring agency, Julia is expected to become a hurricane by the time its eye passes near or over Providencia and San Andres Islands on Saturday night and reaches the Nicaraguan coast on Sunday morning. The agency added Julia is anticipated to weaken as it moves over inland Nicaragua and then likely dissipate on Monday as its remnants move northwest over Central America. Given the situation, the governor of San Andres, Everett Hawkins, announced that a curfew will be in effect as of 6 p.m. local time on Sunday and asked citizens to abide by the recommendations of the authorities.
We want in some way that the community follows the recommendations of the authorities, headed by the departmental government, by the agencies that are part of the National System of Risk and Disaster Prevention, and also the departmental committee.
In statements to the press, the governor of San Andres also detailed that some roads are collapsed due to heavy rains.
One will think that for the amount of rain that has fallen, one does not understand how much is left, but it is the level and the increasing rainfall, the amount of water that is falling at this time, because it has even collapsed some roads throughout the department, and it is important that in the department of the people who are complying with the curfew can size it up. At this time, it is also worth saying that we have taken all necessary measures with all public entities. In this case, the service unit of the Secretary of Public Services, that with that infrastructure we have the machinery available.
In Brazil, the presidential campaign continues. Candidate Lula da Silva held a mass rally in Campinas, state of Sao Paulo. According to local media, hundreds of citizens participate in the rally alongside former Governor Geraldo Alckmin of the coalition Brasil da Esperança and former Mayor Fernando Haddad. The walk started in Largo de Para and will continue to Largo do Rosario. The deputy mayor of Campinas, who expressed his support for the Workers' Party's candidate, also takes part in this event. Lula's visit to the city of Campinas takes place within the framework of the campaign for the presidential runoff to be held on October 30th. The Brazilian federal government announced a new blockade of over $1 billion in funding for higher education in the country. This is in addition to the blockades of $1.34 billion announced between July and August, a measure that brings the contingency in education to $2.4 billion. In a press release, the National Association of Leaders of Federal Institutions for Higher Education points out that the blockade resulted in a cut of $328.5 million in the amounts available for university spendings. The entity denounced that the contingency puts public universities at risk for not having the necessary resources to pay operating and personnel costs, which could have serious consequences. Therefore, the association called for an extraordinary meeting of its board of directors to discuss the current situation as well as the actions and measures to be taken. In Cuba, this Saturday marked the 55th anniversary of the physical disappearance of Argentinian-Cuban revolutionary Ernesto Che Guevara. The ceremony was held in the city of Santa Clara and chaired by Cuban President Miguel Díaz-Canel. The event took place in the mausoleum that guards the remains of Che and those who fell alongside him in the Bolivian internationalist campaign. During the ceremony, his heroic acts, struggle against oppressors, and his commitment to those in need were emphasized. Likewise, Che's farewell letter addressed to Fidel was read, as well as fragments of the commander-in-chief's speech, where he described him as a moral giant whose example multiplied only to grow. Let's take a short break, but first, remember you can now follow us on TikTok at the account at teleSUR English, in which you will be able to see news in different formats, news updates, and much more. Other stories coming up, stay with us. Welcome back from the south. Vehicular traffic on the Crimean Bridge in Crimea has resumed and is now open for light vehicles and buses with a full inspection procedure. The head of the Republic of Crimea, Sergei Aksyonov, announced that traffic was open from Kerch to Taman Peninsula in Krasnodar, where 10 vehicles are allowed to pass at a time. He added that heavy goods vehicles could have to wait to cross by ferry, as trains are expected to start moving later on Saturday. Traffic was suspended on the road and rail bridge after a fuel tank caught fire. The explosion caused a partial collapse of the road on the vehicle section. The bridge was opened in 2018 by Russian President Vladimir Putin to link the peninsula to Moscow's transport network. The spokeswoman of the Russian Investigative Committee, Svetlana Petrenko, confirmed that a criminal probe into the event is underway.
The investigative committee has opened a criminal case after an incident on the Crimean Bridge. According to preliminary information, a truck exploded on the automobile part of the Crimean Bridge from the side of the Taman Peninsula in the morning today, which caused 7 fuel tanks to ignite on a train heading towards the Crimean Peninsula. As a result, 2 lanes partially collapsed.
The spokeswoman of the Russian Foreign Ministry, Maria Zakharova, condemned the reaction of the Kiev regime to the partial destruction of the Crimean Bridge. The Russian official said during an interview that the reaction of Kiev's regime reflects its terrorist nature. Following that, Mikhail Podolyak, advisor to the Ukrainian presidential office, tweeted that the detonation on the bridge in Crimea is the beginning and assured that everything illegal must be destroyed. In turn, Ukrainian National Defense and Security Council Secretary Oleksiy Danilov posted a video of the fire after the explosion on the Crimean Bridge with a photo of Marilyn Monroe wishing good morning to Ukraine. Other Ukrainian government agencies and officials joined the celebration of the terrorist act. After the explosion, the head of the Russian Republic of Crimea provided a message of calm to the population and assured that the infrastructure will be promptly repaired.
Today, I will participate in the governmental commission to clarify the causes of what happened on the Crimean Bridge and to mitigate the consequences of what happened. Measures will be taken to repair the damage and restore what was destroyed. This work will begin immediately upon completion of work by the authorities carrying out the investigation.
The peninsula has enough supplies to operate normally while the transit through the bridge is fully reactivated.
I want to ensure the inhabitants of the Republic of Crimea that the supply of fuel and food is guaranteed. We have fuel for more than a month and food for over 2 months. There are no risks in this respect, and there is no reason to worry.
According to experts, the United States is profiting from Europe by fueling a global energy crisis with the imposition of sanctions against Russia. On July 27th, top U.S. oil producer ExxonMobil posted its biggest quarterly profit of $17.9 billion, up from $4.69 billion a year ago. In the meantime, the oil giant Chevron also reported its stellar profits in the year's second quarter. The sanctions on Russia's energy export have generated an immediate effect. Data with the International Energy Agency showed the European Union imported more liquefied natural gas from the U.S. than from Russia through pipelines for the first time in June. According to the Business Insider, U.S. energy companies are making huge profit through each of their vessels transporting liquefied natural gas to Europe. In the United Kingdom, thousands of supporters of WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange protested outside Parliament on Saturday as they demand the government to cancel plans to extradite him to the United States. Activists led by Julian's wife, Stella Assange, gathered outside the British Parliament in support of the journalist who is currently being held in a British maximum security prison awaiting extradition. Assange's U.S. supporters also demonstrated near the Department of Justice in Washington, where they demanded the Biden administration cancel plans to try the journalist on hacking charges and 17 counts of violating the Espionage Act. If convicted, Assange faces up to 175 years in prison. On Saturday, also tens of thousands of union workers marched through the streets of central Rome to demand fair working conditions and social justice in the wake of the recent election victory of far-right leader Giorgia Meloni. Protesters from all over Italy gathered in the central Piazza della Repubblica, waving flags of the CGIL, Italy's main trade union. They put forward 10 proposals including increases in wages and pensions, the introduction of a minimum wage, a cap on utility bills, a plan for energy self-sufficiency based on renewable sources, safety in the workplace, an effective tax reform, and a universal anti-poverty measure.
The union believes that resources must be found for the weak parts of the country. Hence, we need an effective fight against tax evasion and taxation of extra profits, because it is not possible to have so many degrees of poverty and welfare in the same country, and it is not possible to have people who are poor despite having a job.
A battle for fairer work, for a fairer world of work, is a battle that also concerns us young people, us young Southerners, because the greatest difficulties and the greatest problems are experienced in the south of the country.
More news coming up after a final short break, so don't go away. Welcome back from the South. The Chinese Foreign Ministry on Saturday called on policymakers in the U.S. to heed the objective and rational domestic voices and stop using the outdated zero-sum game mentality in handling China-U.S. relations.
U.S. policymakers need to listen more to the rational and objective voices of the business and academic communities. Stop handling China-U.S. relations with the outdated mindset of zero-sum games. Stop letting its China policy be guided by the so-called political correctness. Seriously uphold the principles of mutual respect, peaceful coexistence, and win-win cooperation, and bring China-U.S. relations back onto the track of sound and steady development.
Chinese health officials said at a press conference on Saturday that the resurgence of COVID-19 cases in Beijing has been traced clearly, with all infections controlled at the earliest possible time.
Over the past 10 days, since September 29, which have all been basically curbed at the earliest possible time. The epidemiological investigation and gene sequencing analysis have showed that a total of 10 transmission chains of the whole 25 infections of Beijing have been figured out. There was no epidemiological link among the transmission chains, with each being independent.
Hundreds of protesters marched near the presidential palace in Manila on Saturday to mark the 100th day in office of Philippine President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. Marcos Jr. has inherited daunting problems, including a coronavirus pandemic-hit economy, soaring inflation, unemployment, and mounting foreign debt, in addition to long-standing poverty and decades-old protest. Marcos Jr. received more than 31 million votes of the more than 55 million votes casted in the May 9th election, a political comeback and victory that will provide him political capital as he faces challenges as well as doubts arising from his father's reputation. In terms of foreign policy, his administration focused to rekindle relations with the United States.
Santos has been in the Malacañan presidential palace for 100 days today, and until now he has not done anything, especially on the increasing prices of basic goods and the safe return of youth to school.
A bus caught fire after hitting a truck on a highway in western India early Saturday, killing at least 11 passengers. Another 24 people were injured and taken to a hospital in Nashik, a city in Maharashtra state, said Eknath Shinde, the top state elected official. Most passengers were sleeping when the bus caught fire around 5 a.m. local time, and the vehicle was completely burned. Shinde added that the cause of the fire is being investigated. Nashik is nearly 200 kilometers northeast of Mumbai, the capital of Maharashtra. Hundreds of thousands of people are killed or injured annually on India's roads. Most accidents are blamed on reckless driving, poorly maintained roads, and aging vehicles. The Syrian Foreign Ministry authorities condemned the blatant plundering of its mineral resources, especially oil, by United States forces in the northeastern part of the Arab nation and demanded compensation for the losses. Through a statement, the Foreign Ministry stated that these practices of U.S. military are despicable and constitute an act of true piracy, as well as an attempt to return to colonial times. Likewise, it recalled that these actions violate international law and the United Nations Charter. The Syrian government urged the UN Security Council to condemn and to stop these actions. The statement also demanded the U.S. immediately withdraw its forces illegally present in Syrian territory and cease its support to terrorists and mercenaries. Gambian President Adama Barrow promised his administration will boost health measures, including better quality control over imported medicines after the mysterious death of dozens of children.
In view of this unfortunate incident, I directed for immediate action that the Ministry of Health works with the Attorney General's chambers to review and update the Medicines and Related Products Act, the Pharmacy Council Act, and all other related legislative frameworks and regulations. The Ministry of Health investigates the source of the contaminated drugs, the circumstances and procedures for importation of medicines into the country, and establish safeguards to eliminate the importation of substandard drugs.
We have come to the end of this news briefing. You can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. You can also join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Telegram, and TikTok. For TeleSUR English, I'm Luis Alberto Matos. Thank you for watching.